Today we attempt to build a Western style gate using the XTOOL Metal Fab.
Okay, as you saw in our last video, we did our first cuts on our XTOOL Metal Fab CNC with a 1200 watt laser. We needed a couple more things, so right here I'm cutting out another mountain lion, and this is 8 times, actually this is 4 times speed right here, and it does really quick work with it. I tell you, I am really happy with the XTOOL Metal Fab CNC. This little combo unit, even though I don't have my air compressor yet, I am able to do all these things with oxygen. So right here I'm bringing in the steel. We are going to basically create our first project, and I'll basically show you one half of this project because it is going to take me some time to build this, but I can show you how quick it is to make a decorative gate using the XTOOL Metal Fab. And right here I have some 3" by 3" square tubing that's basically going to be the frame of this project. And I have a Evolution chop saw for metal, and this chop saw is probably 6 years old, and I have the same blade in it, and it still cuts like butter. And I really like this chop saw. It doesn't shoot a lot of, it catches all the sparks, quite a bit of them, and it makes life pretty easy. You can see right here I'm cutting down through this, and this is it's not super thick square tubing, but it's I didn't want the gates to be too heavy, so this square tubing is only I believe it's 14 gauge actually, so it's not too heavy, so it cuts pretty easy. Once I get the 4 pieces kind of in a manageable situation as far as their sizes, I then change this to a 45 degree and get them ready to cut so that I can basically miter this together. Now, one thing that I am lacking in my shop, and I'm going to try to rectify it, I used to have a big steel acorn table for doing fixturing, for making, where you could clamp things down to a table and then weld them or glue them or whatever you were doing. But I currently, since I moved a few times, and this is basically my last shop for sure, I don't have one of those at this time, and I really need one. You can see when I do this first gate, what I'm having to do. I'm basically cutting these 45s, and I'm having to shim up the other side to make sure they're perfectly flat. If they're not perfectly flat, when you go to clamp these together, you'll have gaps in your weld, and I basically shim these up really good so that they would sit there, and I could cut these 45s and they would clamp up real nice. But it was tricky, in my situation in there, with something this size, not to have a better clamping situation. So I think I'm going to rectify that. Actually, I found a fixture table on Facebook Marketplace used. It's about 2.5 hours away, but the price wasn't too bad, and I think I'm gonna go get it. It's basically about a $5,000 or $6,000 welding table. That's I believe 3,000. I can get it for 3,000 hopefully. We'll see how that goes. Right here, after I get them all measured, cut, 45, I grind all the areas where I'm going to be welding these things, get them prepped for welding. And I'm just using a grinder with a sanding disc. Pretty easy, just go through and get them all clean, bevel the edge a little bit, and get them ready to weld. This project I've actually been waiting to do for a while. I spent the whole summer making cabinets and working on my house and stuff, and I like these little outside projects. They just right there you can see I'm kind of trying to level this up so that I can see if I can get this thing clamped in a really so that it's nice and square. This is where you really need a fixture table. And if you don't know what a fixture table is, I'll show you a picture of one right here. But it really helps to have that. Now I got a little magnet that I'm kind of setting that up, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I keep this thing square on here? And basically I'm putting quite a few clamps on this to, this first piece is really, every piece is important, but this first piece definitely needs to be as square as possible because it's going to dictate the whole thing right here. But I use a steel square, clamp the steel square on there, and I'm basically just using some clamps, and then I kind of look at it. I think, I need to clamp this thing with a metal brace going across it to make sure it's square with the long square tube. So right here, I'm basically taking another piece of square tubing that I had laying around, and clamping this so that it stays really nice and straight. And that actually worked pretty good. But you can tell, I mean, if you had a fixture table, it'd be a lot easier than what I'm trying to do here. Anyway, it's been a while since I've done any welding. I got a Hobart wire feed welder here. You might be thinking, why don't you use your new laser welder? I didn't really buy that XTOOL Metal Fab CNC for welding. Although I am going to try using it on stainless steel and aluminum, I don't see the need to use it on steel. The wire feed welder works really good, and I don't think I'd even use the cleaning. It has you can clean stuff with the laser, but I don't see myself doing that either. I mean, it's pretty quick to just take a disc grinder and grind whatever if you have rust on your metal or something, just grind it off. But the wire feed welder, I'm perfectly happy using that. Right here, I'm checking the measurements a few times to see if I need to move this at all. And then I start tack welding all these tubes up. Now what I'm going to do is tack all four corners of the square tubing until it's all put together, and then check the square, and then I'll fully weld it. But right here, I'm just going to be tacking it, and tacking it on all four sides so it doesn't move, and then I'll basically just move on to the last big piece right there. I enjoy doing different things, it's fun. I love working with wood, but I also, steel's fun to work with too. It can be satisfying. Right here you can see I'm getting this thing clamped together. And I checked square right here actually. Right there you can see I'm checking corner to corner. And it actually was looking pretty good. Matter of fact, when I got all of it tacked up really good, I ended up pulling the clamps off and checking the squareness corner to corner, and it was within a 1/16 of an inch. So it was really, actually, I was pretty happy with that, especially working in this type of environment where I don't have a steel table, or I'm basically just setting it on this little tripod out there. And right here I'm going through, now that it's all square and everything, I'm going through and welding it solid. And my welds started off a little rough in the beginning because it's been a while since I've been welding, but in the end they kind of started coming out a lot better. Here you can see I'm still welding. Basically I flipped it over and was welding the other side. Once I get the frame all welded, it was time to grind it up, and if I would have done a little better job welding, I wouldn't have had as much grinding to do. But some of my welds were a little thick, and I had to kind of clean them up a little bit. Like I said, towards the end I got a little better, but if you're welding every day, you pretty good. But if you're welding once in a while, of course I'm going to be welding for the next few days, so I should get better towards the end. Matter of fact, the second half of this gate will probably be a lot better than the first half, but we'll try to make them look as close to the same as possible for sure. But in this video, I'm just going to show you how easy it is to make one of these gates using the XTOOL Metal Fab. Basically, in my last video, I showed you, cutting out all these animals and everything, and then in this video we're going to show putting together this gate. Okay, before I get too carried away, I kind of want to take a look at a few of these animals and see. Last night my wife, she kind of took a look and she said, oh, it needs to have 4 animals. But I was thinking, you know, when I saw the little pine tree by the moose, I was kind of thinking that maybe it just needs a few pine trees. So there's the bear. So originally I had designed both these gates. So there's 2 of these gates side by side and they open in the middle. But originally I had designed it to have 3 animals. Basically something like that. Which actually I think is pretty good. The only thing I'm thinking is maybe if the bear was right there and then I had a pine tree in the corner, pine tree right here, the moose pine tree could be, and then maybe a pine tree over here. So we need maybe to make a few more pine trees and maybe a little taller. Let's see, move your hand close. Of course not. So yeah, you could even have a tree coming off like that. You know? So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the computer. I'm going to get a couple pine trees. Actually, that moose pine tree looks pretty bitchin'. If I could grab that and make it bigger, that would be a good one for in the middle. So I'm going to go over to my computer. I'm not going to bore you with that, but we'll see if we can't come up with a few more pine trees, and then we'll cut them on the XTOOL Metal Fab. Anyway, I'll be right back. Okay, here we have our first added pine trees coming out of the XTOOL Metal Fab. They actually came right out of the metal too. It's pretty impressive, that machine. Now here we're going to put one on each side. One thing I realized is they're, you know, even though these animals are just kind of winging out in the wind, the way that I can secure them from the bottom to the top is basically to add more of a forest in this background. And I'll show you what I mean when I start getting further along. Right here I'm going to start welding all. I like where these are placed, and I got approval from my wife that, you know, she liked the positioning. So right here I'm going to start welding them in the center of this square tubing and basically get them all secured. I'm basically going to stitch weld these long ones in there. The short trees I weld solid, but the big long flat pieces I'm just going to stitch weld every 3 inches just to, I mean, they're not really doing anything, but it will hold them really nicely. And I basically just go through and weld all these. It would be a lot better if I had this whole thing standing up on a welding table. Welding on your knees is a pain in the ass. But yeah, I'm just getting it done, and I did make a commitment to buy this welding table, and I'll show you a picture of it right here. And hopefully the next gate will be reviewing the welding table. All right, the next thing I do is put it up a little higher, make it a little easier for me to weld and look at it. And I wanted to add basically more trees and more support. So what I'm doing here is I printed out some, I cut some on my metal fab, cut some different sized trees, and I'm basically gonna start adding trees, and then I'm gonna figure out how to add some mountains to the back. I was able to, I was running out of steel, but I was able to cut a couple more of these trees and kind of look at them and see if I liked them. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is actually, I'm gonna go on the computer and see if I can't find some mountains to put in the background. And maybe even a few more trees. I love the way you can nest things using the camera. So you can put a piece of steel in there and basically lay out your things that you want to cut in that area that's not cut. So you really save on your steel. You basically, save all your pieces and then see if you can fit those pieces in there. What I realized is I really want to add a lot of trees inside this, and not just support, but for the look of the whole thing. Now, hopefully I can add these trees, but not take away too much from my animals. Let me know what you think in the comments. But yeah, it's getting closer and closer. I've got some more trees to cut out. I've got a bass fish to make for the handle, but it's coming along. Okay, this is my first attempt at cutting a thick piece of steel. This is 1/4" carbon steel, and I'm cutting out my first fish. Now this probably is not going to be the fish that I use, because this is a piece of scrap steel and the back side of this steel is really rusted, but I was able to cut through it and it actually didn't turn out too bad. The next thing I needed was a big tree, so the first thing I do is cut out this really big tree, as big as I could, at a diagonal on this 2 foot by 2 foot metal, and it popped right out. So I then proceeded to cut some small trees on each side of this. Once I get some different sized trees cut out, it was just a matter of placing them in the right positions to where I thought it would look good. I don't really know if they're in the right positions, but I thought they looked pretty good, so I started welding all these little trees in here. I'm trying to give it kind of a 3-dimensional look, like not just be flat, be, a little bit 3-dimensional. And I'm not really worried about, if they can move or not. They're not going to be, they're going to be solid welded and they're 2mm steel, but I'm really trying to go for a really cool look. And I'll probably try to figure out how to support everything a little better inside there as I go. But I'm kind of just moving along. I'm kind of winging it. Let me know in the comments what you think of it so far, and we will continue on. Next up, it was time to cut. This is the thickest metal that you can cut with this laser. This is basically 10mm steel, basically about 3/8 of an inch. And I'm attempting to, I liked the way the fish turned out, so right here I'm attempting to cut out the fish. And this is where I made my first mistake on the XTOOL Metal Fab. So it calls for a 1.2 nozzle with the extension on it. And I accidentally left a 1.0 nozzle in there. And then on the oxygen, I don't think the oxygen, even though I had it set at about 10 pounds, I think as it cruised through there, the oxygen wasn't high enough. So I need to set that regulator at about 15 pounds and then make sure I have the right nozzle on it. So that was my first failure, and it did overheat and shut down, and it did not cut out very well. I was able to get the fish out of the metal, but it was very hard to get it out of there. It basically welded itself together on the bottom. Okay, I'm back in my software now. The fish that I just cut a little while ago didn't really come out that good. It didn't, and I realized that my settings were wrong. So right up here, it says 1.2mm nozzle, and I had the 1.0 on it. I had the extension tube, but I had the 1.0, and I didn't notice that it changed it to a 1.2 from going to 1/4" to 3/8. So you really need to pay attention, and that's my fault. Now, right here I got 13.5 PSI, and it calls for 8.7, but I'm actually going to turn that up to 15. Someone suggested that it might start losing it might start losing oxygen pressure. Sometimes, you know, as it goes, it'll start losing. So I'm gonna turn that up just a little bit. Cutting with the fixture. We're cutting the thickest it'll cut, 10 millimeter. We're using oxygen 1.2. Okay, let's calibrate this. This is gonna be my second try. So my first attempt, you saw me trying to cut out the fish and that fish right there, and it was really hard to get out of there. Basically it cut it, but it basically placed it in a really bad position. Now I'm gonna move this to a little better location here. Let's say right there. And I'm gonna recalibrate because I moved it a little bit. Make sure that it's, I don't know if you have to calibrate it every time you move it. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna do it. So right there, we'll go ahead and calibrate. Now you can see the speed is at 12 and following, I'm gonna leave all that the same. So now I have the right nozzle and I have my PSI turned up a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and process. And right now it says put that at 2. So I'm gonna actually go double check that real quick before I push start. Okay, it is on 2, so let's go over to the machine and we will start this. Okay, this was my second attempt at cutting some thick steel, 3/8 inch thick steel. And this one popped right out. Actually, it was a fly that's gonna go on the other side of the gate for next to the fish on the different side. You know, it cut right through, no problem, really nice. Okay, that was a big difference. It dropped right out. Now, this thing actually dropped right out of there. Now, I don't know, it does have a little slag on it, but not much. And it's got some pretty sharp, you know, this is a fly. Basically, the idea is that on this gate, this fish is gonna be on this side of this gate, and then I'm gonna have another gate here, and I'm gonna have this hook like, you know, something. I don't know how, but it'll either probably be like this on this other gate. I thought that would look cool. Yeah, probably right about there. But the edges are a little rough. I mean, they're not terrible. I could never do this with a plasma cutter, but the edges are a little bit rough. So I imagine that I just have to learn more about these settings. Now, I'm not sure if maybe it needs to go faster to get cleaner edge, like if it goes too slow. But that's pretty impressive. So, and this is 3/8 inch thick steel. So my second attempt was a lot better. I'm gonna do a little research. Maybe if you speed it up, let me know in the comments if you've done that before. But I might do another piece. Although, yeah, I do need to do a few brackets. So I might speed it up a little bit and see if that helps. So I have some brackets that I need to make for the rod that goes down into the ground here, and also a padlock bracket, a couple of those. So I got about three brackets to make, and now that I can cut them out pretty good, I think I'm going to go ahead and draw those up right now, and then cut that out. So yeah, I'll test these settings. I'll see if I can't do a little research, and maybe I can get this edge to be a lot nicer. But I think it's just a matter of practice. Okay, time to finish up this video and this gate. We got about 3 trees right here to put on. There's one little one, then there's one over here by the mountain lion, and then I got a big one in the back to put on. And then there's another little one right there. I tried to do this actually kind of 3-dimensional, and I think I'm liking it. Right here I've got the fish, and basically this is that fish that I cut out of the 3/8 inch steel, and it was a little tough to get it out of that steel, you know, because this was the first big thing that I cut out of thick steel. But yeah, it came out okay. And right here I'm gonna I'm going to grind this corner, and then I'm going to weld this fish onto this corner. And it's kind of cool the angle that I welded it at right there, because it looks like the bear is actually going up after it. And so that kind of worked out pretty good. It's a little tight to weld it underneath the fish, but it worked out okay. And I'm just using a wire feed welder. And yeah, it actually went pretty good. It's pretty strong right here. So I think that fish will be a nice little handle. And there it is, it's all finished. And basically, that's the gate. And here it is powder coated, what it would look like if it was powder coated. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video. See you next time. Later.
There he goes, it's a working man. He's trying to make a living any way he can. And he'll break it.